Greetings, YouTube. The earth is degenerating these days. Bribery and corruption abound. Children no longer mind their parents. Every man wants to write a book, and it is evident that the end of the world is fast approaching. Now, that particular quote came from a stone tablet carved by an Assyrian 4,800 years ago. So, the sentiment that the world is going to hell in a handbasket is not new. It's probably far older than that text is, probably pretty much as old as our species is. And just like that quote, someone is always looking to blame the journey to hell in a handbasket on something. In this particular case, books. At other times, people have blamed the journey to our damnation on literacy, minority religions, jazz, rock and roll, comic books, movies, television, drugs, and the latest thing to be added to this long list, video games. Now, I'm going to put a link to an article that talks about the fact that there appears to be no link between video games and violence. But I'm sure that the people who believe that there is a link between videos and games and violence are not going to believe it. Simply because they don't want to deal with the larger issue at hand. The larger issue is that there are things in the world that go on that people don't like. That these things create a sense of chaos, a sense of loss of control in people. And so they're desperately looking to pin all of these ills on something, anything. Now, there's another saying, not quite as old as the first, that for every complex problem, there is a simple solution, and it is wrong. There are no simple solutions to anything. There never have been. There never going to be any simple solutions. The problems of the world are complex, and they require thoughtful, in-depth, complex answers. But people don't like them. It takes effort to acquire them. It takes effort to execute them. It takes time and money and our personal lives to do it. And no one wants to spend those things. They just want something they can slap a label on it and then throw it out the window and convince themselves that this, in fact, is now going to mean all of our problems are gone. And that kind of burying one's head in the sand philosophy of life isn't good for anyone. I know, I spent years doing it. I ignored my own medical issues, and to the point I became a diabetic. There's a possibility I could have stopped the process if I'd seen a doctor on a regular basis and listened to my own body. But I did neither of those things. So now, I've had 6 laser surgeries under my eyes. I can't feel my feet anymore. I take insulin once a day, and I eat a diet that, take my word for it, is not one I prefer. And this is just on a personal basis. As intimately personal as you can get your own health. And if I'm willing to ignore this, then you can well imagine that people who are not being affected by something directly are more than willing to slap a label on it and throw it out the window so they can ignore it. But it isn't going to solve anything. Now, I've read several books over the years, more than several, that deal with the concept of raising healthy, well-adjusted boys from childhood up through adolescence and young adulthood. And every single one of the books I've read, every single one, at some point in the book, breaks down to moral panic, to placing the blame on things other than the fact that the reason boys sometimes turn out bad is an incredibly complex problem. I have been disappointed with every one of these books. Though some of them have made it till, the 3/4, maybe even 7/8 of the way through before they threw the towel in and said, oh, no, it's video games and rock music and all these other things. It's not those things. Now, those things can trigger issues in people who already have issues. If you come to the party already broken, you may well latch onto something and run with it. But that doesn't mean that the thing you've latched onto is the cause of the problem. It's just the symptom. It's just what you personally latched onto. But that's, again, it's easier just to say it's rock music or it's video games than to deal with the real issue at hand. Now, I'm sure that video games will be continued to be blamed for the ills of the world, at least in the Western world, until the next topic of moral panic comes along, and then 30 years from now, people will look back upon video games with nostalgia, and they'll smile, and they'll think, well, how silly it was that we thought they were the cause of the problem, just the way we look back upon rock and roll music of the 50s and 60s, which are now golden oldies, and played on old stations, with fondness, and think, oh, how could we ever have thought that was the cause of the problem? Because it wasn't the cause of the problem then, it isn't the cause of the problem now, it's not going to be the cause of the problem in the future. The problem is the problem is complex. And no one wants to deal with that fact. They want a simple solution to a complex answer. And no matter how hard they try, they are always going to be wrong.